Hey everybody, welcome to EIS Live. The first thing I want to tell you today is today's broadcast is not live. It's actually a recorded live show. So unfortunately, you won't be able to ask any questions today, but you can certainly leave comments. And if I have done my research correctly, I believe those comments will show up later on YouTube and Facebook. So make sure that you put them up there and let us know how you felt about what's going on today. So I know some of you know plenty about EIS and that are involved with EIS, but there's also people who do not know about EIS. And so I like to always start off by giving us a little brief description of what EIS is. So we're a counseling, coaching, and mentoring entity that really helps people find freedom in their lives to become all they're intended to be and discover their why and their purpose. How do we do that? So we do that by employing a process that gives people an opportunity to dig far enough into their past and uncover broken, unhealed, and undealt with areas that continually prevent them from discovering healthy patterns in life as individuals and relationships and marriage, business, and employment settings, and really helping people just to become a whole person and not just fix certain areas, which is usually how counseling is perceived. We go for counseling because we need to fix something that's wrong with us. So we also extend this process into leadership development, as we believe leadership starts from within, meaning that if we don't deal with the issues of our own hearts and in the interiors of our souls and so on and so forth, and the stuff that's wrong in there, it's going to be hard to translate that into healthy leadership in our families and into the world around us. So it's not just becoming a great problem solver or decision maker as a leader, but really developing a heart to lead and a desire to raise others up to be the people that they're called to be, just as we talked about for ourselves. Instilling character, integrity, and accountability and other hallmarks of genuine leadership into others around us. And I've noticed it's hard to do that if we're not operating in that way. So we want to develop those virtues within ourselves as we go through a process. So we offer what we believe to be a comprehensive approach to personal growth and maturity, from the individual to CEOs and businesses and everybody in between. Also, throughout the broadcast today, you'll see things popping up like on how to connect with EIS if you desire to do so. So we'll give you that information as we move along. And then also these live shows are here to feature testimonies of people's lives that have been transformed in many ways, that are still on the journey, other professionals in the field of helping other people in similar ways, and EIS staff counselors like today, and authors of books that we believe are important resources that support the work that we do here at EIS. And I just want to remind you again, today is a pre-recorded episode, so do not be posting any questions. They're not going to go anywhere. They'll just wind up in cyberspace and just won't be seen by anybody. So normally right now, I'd be introducing my co-host, Vanessa, who is my media czar. She takes care of all monitoring of broadcasts and posting on Instagram and all of that. But today's a little bit different. Vanessa couldn't be here today, so my friend Zoraida James is here to fill in. So let's ask her to come on. Hey, Zoraida.
Hi, Bill.
Thanks for coming on such short notice.
Oh, totally. It's my pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. And like I always say, this is the time where we pretend we weren't talking just a few minutes ago.
Exactly.
But here we are. We're putting on a show.
Yep.
But yeah, thanks again for doing this on short notice. And you and I have been working together, I think it's about 1.5 years now, right? Is that correct?
Yep.
And so you're definitely one of those who is a real avid student of the process and really engaged in the process and have been, demonstrating tons and tons of really good fruit from working the process too. So I thought to kind of start off today,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe you could share a little bit about, your experience with going through this past 1.5 years, how it started off in a nutshell, of course, and, kind of where you're at today and what that looks like, and even as an encouragement for other people to think about getting involved.
Sure. Yeah. I'd love to share. So I had heard in a seminar a while ago, actually, and it said you want to be so close to your mentor. They use the word rabbi. They said you want to be so close to your rabbis that you get blessed with their dust. And I remember ever since I heard that, I started, anytime I got together with a counselor or a mentor, I noticed that I wanted to be, like you said, like an an avid student, and then just being most accountable that I could be. And like you said, I started working with you about a year and a half ago. And when I came to you, and I know I've mentioned this to you before, but I literally had no idea what kind of ride I was getting on. Like I thought I knew, but I didn't really know. And I always poke fun at myself with that because I had no idea that I would be today where I had no idea that I would be where I am today. So yeah, so I, again, like I didn't know when I came to you, I didn't know that I came from a traumatic childhood. I had no idea that I was struggling with dissociation, anxiety, depression, all these things, like any of that. I had no idea that any of that was even inside of me.
It was just your normal life at that point, right?
Right. Yeah, that was just my simple life. I thought this was what everybody had to go through. This is everybody's life, and I called it, this is just me operating in chaos, and that's what that looked like. So I thought I just needed, a little help here and there, fix it, help me put a little Band-Aid on my wound, and we're going to call it a day. And that was that. So yeah. So once I started the archaeological work, like what you call the archaeological work and journaling, and I started like digging up all those traumas, I found out it wasn't just a tiny little wound, but I was going through like some sort of like surgery. I think you had used the word, is it dialysis? Is that what you said? What you had said? I don't know if you remember. Yeah, we're basically like I forgot how you mentioned it, but basically I felt like I was going through surgery, because I went from being anxious to finding freedom. I went from having suicidal thoughts to basically having hope and knowing that I had a prosperous future. I went from codependency and carrying burdens to those around me to putting up healthy boundaries and prioritizing my self-care. And then I went from carrying shame and condemnation to forgiving myself and creating space to just just creating space for me to basically give myself grace. And yeah, all those trauma triggers, the PTSD, like all of that, etc. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that I had to work on. Obviously, I'm still a work in progress, but now I'm just looking forward to all of that's to come as I continue my work with you.
And one of the biggest aspects, and you mentioned yourself when you got into the archaeological journaling aspect of things, that's been such a huge part for you. You're one of the star journalists that I've been working with. And there's only a handful, really, of all the people that I do see, is that really lay hold of that journaling aspect of things. Just real quick, how much do you feel that really has helped you in this whole process that you just outlined for us of what, you went from this to this, this to this, and how much did that journaling have to do with that?
Oh my goodness, the biggest chunk. It literally, I feel like there was just moving marbles inside of my mind, like just like a fuzzy, I don't know how to describe it, but basically I just picked it up and like put it on the paper. And once it was on the paper, I felt like I was able to identify the patterns from childhood, not even within my own self and the way my own behavioral stuff, but the way my mom acted and the way my grandmother acted or my dad. And I was able to kind of piece all of that together. And yeah, I mean, just to answer your question, basically it was like the biggest chunk, that journaling thing. If I never did the journaling stuff, I would have never gotten this far into my journey.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks for people when it comes to being in the process. It's one of the hardest things to do, especially with different temperaments, to be able to dig and to pull back those layers and you really have to be courageous enough to be able to do that and go in there and to say, okay, what's in there, that I've just kind of kept in. And like you said, I just operated in chaos and thought that was the normal way that you live. And it's just part of life. And, you got to get used to it, kind of thing. But no, we don't have to live that way. And, we can become free, because really God's intention is that we would just be free and free to be, who we genuinely are. And we can't genuinely be who we are if we're carrying all that baggage with us and operating out of that place all the time. So thanks for sharing that. That was really awesome. So make sure that you're interjecting tons of questions for our next guest, because you're a guest too. So I'm waiting a long time to do this. Justin and Amanda, I'm going to let them kind of let us know. I'm not going to talk too much about them. I'm going to let them share about themselves. And we've been together. I think it's might be just a little bit under 2 years at this point. But they're down there in Florida, and our Florida team is growing all the time. So I want to welcome our guests today, Justin and Amanda McNeil.
Hello.
Hey guys. Hello,
guys.
hello.
Yay. Isn't this cool? We get to talk from the West Coast, and Zoraida's down in it's Georgia, right? Yeah, it's Georgia. And you guys are down there in Florida.
We're all over the place, and it's a good thing, actually, because usually I'm all over the place in other ways. So now we're all over the place in a good way.
We're all over the place together.
Yeah, be all over the place in one place. It just makes it a little bit more.
That's the goal.
So, yeah, thank you guys for being here today. How long have we been working together? I kind of lost track of that.
That's all you.
About a year and a half?
We've officially been part of the EIS team for just over a year and a half, but we met almost 2 years ago, Bill. We were on a Zoom in a Whole Foods, just randomly like, let's meet this Bill Hoffman
It was
guy.
the strangest email, and it was like, hey, I would love to connect with you. And I had just taught a fitness class. I'm drenched in sweat. I put on a shirt, but I'm in shorts. And we're in a Whole Foods cafe sharing earbuds. And then Bill's like, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I was like, I literally put it on mute, and I was like, he doesn't like me. He doesn't like me.
Guys, I've never heard this story.
It's hilarious.
Yes.
Behind the scenes.
But it was cool. From that first moment we talked, it was just very clear that this was a connection that was truly meant to be. And it's been a wild ride and a wonderful one since then.
Yeah, and you'll be articulating a little bit about that, the transition and everything that you've been going through as we kind of chat a little bit.
Definitely.
So, yeah, and again, thanks for doing this. I know it's been hard to try to find a time that would work for all of us, but here it is.
Yes, we made it happen.
Yes.
So I always kind of like to start off with folks, just so that, like I mentioned to you last night when we were chatting about this, is, we didn't start off as counselors in life. We weren't born this way and just like plopped into this position. We grew up as children, of course, and came through life and through our own struggles and challenges and everything that we went through. And then now we're here. So we'd like to hear a little bit of that backstory.
Oh goodness.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So we actually grew up together. So I met her when I was 10 years old.
Yep.
And right there it is, Zoraida. So we were kids and we met at church together.
Oh, he left out my age for once.
It's not an important detail, but I was 10. And so we met at church, and we were both on the puppet team. So like we were both backstage doing puppets, and I was like, "Hi, I'm Justin," and that's how it started for us. And we were friends, truly like the best of friends for like 9 years. We went to school together. We went to church together, and then we started working together, shared an office together. She moved into the house next door to me and was my neighbor. And then we applied to the same university, unbeknown to each other, ended up both getting accepted and commuting 90 minutes one way to this university every day. And so there was a lot of togetherness, and we never dated through any of that. Although everyone was always like, when are you two getting together? I had a whole lot of process to go through myself, but one day I realized, like, what is wrong with me? Like, what is wrong with me? And so in my junior year of college, we started dated for 3 years, and then got married in 2010. And so, yeah, it's been an incredible journey. I'm not sure if there's, I think I did the broad strokes.
Yeah, but I covered it. It was good. It's interesting building your life together with similar values and in the same community. There is, it's interesting with our story. There's so much we don't have to explain to one another. There's so many stories, even from our childhood or teen years, that we already know about one another.
Yeah, she was there for most of my trauma, so I can just like refer to it, and she knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Sure, and that's so unique, and we recognize that not everybody has that dynamic and that perspective. But it also has its challenges too, and we're grateful to continually be growing in our marriage and in our communication and all those dynamics.
Yeah,
but
knowing each other that long, I think it's easy to just feel like this is the same old thing because you're so used to the same patterns, so used to the same cycles. I mean, I still consider us young. However, we've been together a long time. And so it's easy to feel that. But then you look at this person that you've known since childhood and realize like they're changing in front of my eyes. And to have to fall in love again, to have to give grace again, to have to be attracted again and again. It's I think
that one's not that
hard. Thank you. That's true too. But yeah, so like stepping into parenthood, it was like seeing her as a mother. It was like meeting a woman that I didn't even know existed in her. So it's been a cool journey. Our son is 5.5, and this is the only time we could film because he's not in the house. Otherwise, this would be a no.
Forget about it, right? And before you go on, let me throw something at, because what you said is so super important about, you know, growing up together for so long and knowing each other's trauma like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when in a healthy relationship, in any situation, you know, when each other can be interested in and want to discover the other person's trauma is a demonstration of love.
Yes.
And not just be triggered and cycled by it.
Right.
So to be able to recognize those things, to understand them from the inside out, so to speak, and then to be able to healthily work together towards transforming those areas and see how we can work together, you know, to help one another is such an unusual scenario. You don't see too much of that. It's usually the opposite, of course, is everybody's trauma triggered,
Sure.
you know, by one another, and they have such a huge difficult time getting past that.
Right.
Well, it takes a great deal of maturity to be able to recognize the line between this is my issues, or these are my issues that I need to be responsible to own and deal with and work through. I see how the ripple effects are spilling over onto you. And those are your issues that I can love you and encourage you in, but you have to invest in yourself to heal and to grow through those things. It's really hard sometimes to find that line.
It must have really been hard with Justin, I guess, right?
Woo! Yeah,
he's so quiet. He just doesn't talk.
Oh yeah. You gotta just open yourself up a little bit, Justin.
Right, I'll try. No, she's a saint, and it's been understanding our differences and that my way is not the right way. So I'm very choleric compulsive. And so often I try to pull individuals to like, we'll do it this way. And I have to realize, and I work with cholerics a lot, that's your way. Mm-hmm. Unless we're talking about moral right and wrong and like truth and fallacy, unless we're talking about that, we're talking about your way, your preference. And I know it feels right to me for you to behave this way, but I actually have to give space that your way might be different from my way.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about that actually. So the whole story that you guys just talked about in terms of meeting Bill at Whole Foods with your little AirPods.
It was so weird.
Yeah. So prior to that, did you guys have already the temperaments? Like, did you already know each other's temperaments?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's actually the reason that we got connected, because we had been doing temperament work for many years prior. It was one of the first things we did. I got my temperament certification like almost immediately in my education, because when I was finishing high school, someone gave me the temperament test, and I'm choleric compulsive, supine. And it was like the lights turned on for me. Like I discovered so much of why I could be aggressive and forward and driven in so many ways. But when someone is close to me, I just feel like I'm missing something, or I don't know how to proceed. When I understood that, things started to click. We started dating. Like everything really began to change. And then
it wasn't so instantaneous.
No,
there was a process.
Yeah. But it was a real turning point for us. And that's when we both got our certifications and started doing temperament work in a church context, and started working with couples. But temperament was always the tool we used. And so then Bill is the Jedi of temperament. Somehow, our paths crossed to a mutual friend, Mike Siggs, and we just started talking because we had the same training.
Yeah. And we've actually had our temperament certifications for a few years before we ever started dating. So we've had these tools in the context of our relationship the whole time.
Knowing your boyfriend or girlfriend's temperament, 10 out of 10 can recommend. It can help a lot.
Yes. And then to be able to just still, over a decade later, be understanding more layers of what that actually looks like. It's such an invaluable resource. And I always tell my clients, I'm a temperament nerd. I could talk about it all day, but it's because there's so much life-giving language that helps those light bulb moments happen. And it just helps click like, oh, that's why I'm motivated this way, or that's why we have conflict in that way, or we work well together in this dynamic. So super helpful.
That gives me so much perspective on, okay, so that clears everything up, because the reason I asked that question is because I was going to ask, how did it affect your relationship after you found out about the temperaments? But you guys entered the relationship already having that tool on your belt. So that's amazing. That is amazing.
For sure. We're grateful.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was just thinking too that that the aspect of temperament, I mean, the way that we kind of design the process, or I'm not even going to say design, because I didn't design it. It's just I started to see the pieces of the process over the years, and saw how they kind of dovetailed into each other aspect, you know? And so, like what you just pointed out too, is like knowing the temperament is like the doorway in to so many other areas, including trauma, you know, because when we see like, well, no wonder I always act this way when that happens. And I've been doing that historically all of my life. And how many times have we heard people say that? Like, no wonder I've always acted that way in these types of situations. It's because the propensity of temperament is to do that, especially, and of course, I don't want to get into a whole temperament study here, but, you know, the negative aspects or the weaknesses of temperament as opposed to the strengths, you know, those dysfunctional patterns and trauma patterns will always have the tendency to push us into the negative aspects of our temperament makeup. And that's why we act out in those areas and create cycles, because there's nowhere else to go with them.
Sure.
So again, like bringing it back to what you were saying, is like having that under your belt, as Loretta said, is that you're able to move forward. And it doesn't mean that you have all the answers and you're just automatically fixed in these areas, but it does give you a bit of an edge in moving forward and understanding and saying like, yeah, I get that about you.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah. And it's so freeing to know like, oh, something's not necessarily broken or wrong with our relationship. We just see things very differently and process things very differently.
Tremendous insight.
Yeah.
So how did you know, moving forward in your journey and in your you know, your church life and all of that, and I guess you started to see some certain needs in the church and so on and so forth, that you know, having this you know, this experiential understanding in yourselves, I would imagine, in an environment, especially in a church environment, which is a place where people really need to be going to get healed and find, you know, freedom and understand about themselves. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen all the time. But, you know, those of us who have a heart to counsel, I think, really do have that eye out, you know, for that. How did that translate into that environment for you guys?
Yeah, I love that. I always say that thankfully we were in and are in the most ideal setting. It is what actually fostered and cultivated our gifts. So I am a church kid through and through. I grew up in church, and so did she. Her parents were pastors and missionaries. We're both pastors, and our kid just literally was like at church the week he was born. So took his first steps at church. It was the best day. It's fitting. And we have been privileged to see the beauty of it. Our church has always had such an open conversation about mental health, about personal growth. Our founding pastors laid a strong foundation. One of our founding pastors is brilliant. Actually, they're both brilliant PhDs. She in particular is a psychologist, a sex therapist, a hypnotherapist, like a temperament specialist, like everything. And you can imagine how that informed so much about the way that we grew up in ministry. And I'm so grateful for our pastors in that context. And so it was always there. And she's actually the one who kind of pulled us under her wing and allowed us to get this training and exposure to this vital truth. So for me, and I think it's very different from my wife, but for me, I can remember in college, I was in an abnormal psych class, and we were doing a case study on an individual with bipolar disorder. And it was the first time that I engaged in a situation where I got to see up close firsthand the impact of mental illness. And I observed this individual in their manic stage, and this person grew up in church. And so their language was very religious. They talked about hearing angels and hearing God. And it was very convincing, and it seemed 100% spiritual. And then we observed the individual in their depressive state. and they were almost catatonic, and they talked about demons and this deep spiritual turmoil that they found. Again, very convincing, very gripping. And then the individual talked about how many churches she had been in and kicked out of, and how many prayers were prayed over her. And I believe in the power of prayer. But then we got to see the individual on their treatment plan, and she was the most lovely, balanced, wonderful individual. And what I loved is that she was still faith-filled, but also was able to express how getting help, and not only getting medical treatment, but also working through counseling, allowed her to deal with and heal from her trauma. And I was just like crying in the club. Like, I'm in the back row of this class just weeping, because I realized, like, I don't ever want to be the kind of leader who misses the chance to meet people where they are. And I just remember thinking, I need to be equipped, and I want to be as equipped as possible, because if we're going to really help people, then it has to be from a place of a true compassion and care to help. So I can remember that was the day I was like, this is it. This is how I'm going to help. I want to be as equipped as I can, and not only understand myself, but help others do that as well. And that's kind of how the journey launched. And it took a really beautiful path in a ministry context, and a lot of pastoral counseling and temperament counseling. And along the way, getting to work with families at all different stages of their journey. It's been quite a gratifying experience.
Mine is very, very different. So as he said, I grew up with a stable, healthy family in the church dynamic. I'm the oldest of both of my parents' second marriage. So that was an interesting dynamic, having step siblings or half siblings. And
I'm an only child, in case anyone was wondering.
In case it wasn't clear.
I love how you got so close to the camera.
This is my life, used to it. So I grew up in faith and in church, and I always knew loving people and serving people would be a part of my life. I just didn't have a clear picture until when I was 14. My father unexpectedly passed away in an airplane accident. And when you go through a trauma like that, not being able to say goodbye, not being able to have any kind of closure on your own terms, it forces you to kind of wrestle with the realities of pain and loss and life and love and relationships.
Wow.
And the day my father died, I mean, within maybe an hour, I remember screaming, crying in prayer. It was probably the most hideous worship and prayer ever heard. But I remember saying, God, you know, the Bible says in Romans 8:28 that you cause all things to work together for the good of those who love you and are called to your purposes. I said, I love you. I know I'm called. My dad loved you. I don't see how you can bring any good out of this, but I don't believe you're a liar. So I need you to prove yourself true in my life. And it was in that moment that I just felt the grace of my grief isn't going to mean nothing. It isn't going to be pain for pain's sake, but I was called to walk alongside those who are hurting. And I knew counseling is actually part of my redemption story, that every time I'm able to be there for someone who's hurting, and not that I can 100% understand what everyone's going through, but if I can connect with a measure of the pain and help relieve it and help point them to the healer and point them to truth, then it makes my pain worth something. So that's what propelled me toward this field and the education. And it's been beautiful to just see layers after layers of my professional journey even unfold in this space.
You're so good at it too. I get free counseling from her all the time, and she's so good at it.
And the Lord knows you need it.
Yeah, it's so real.
Just kidding. I think it's you know, this idea that you know, people who are counseling, you know, are the ones who have it all together, have all the answers, is just so not true. And, you know, and once again, I hear this demonstration of, you know, your own past experiences being brought into your current life, and what used to perhaps be areas of struggle, or, you know, areas that you had deficit in, or even traumatized in and experienced grief. Those are all transformed. And that's what you just quoted in the scripture, Amanda, is that he turns all things to the good, as he transforms things.
Yeah.
The broken things of our hearts are transformed so that other people can partake of that transformation as well and have hope in their situation that they too can, find this place of healing, find this place of freedom, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. To me, this is one of the ways God has turned it for good. It wasn't good, but this is one way God has brought good from it.
Mm-hmm. Zoraida, anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, Amanda, as you were talking, I didn't know that part of your story. And as you were talking about how he, and basically you helping others and counseling, what that did for you to make your pain worth something, that made me think of the story that I had talked about during my testimony with the olive and how basically like it gets squeezed, and then that oil that comes out of that olive, you can now use it for light for others.
Wow.
To show them the way, to show them this is the way, and show them to their creator. So I thank you for sharing that part of your story. Like it really touched my heart, because I was able to resonate with it as well. But yeah, that was so good.
Yeah, I love that analogy because that pressing can either crush us or we can allow it to produce something beautiful. So it's great.
Yes.
Well, let's keep moving ahead. So I think, in terms of, especially even in the same realm as we just talked about, like taking those broken areas and seeing them transformed and then being used in other people's lives. The fact of your long-standing relationship that went back to your childhood, even, that's another area that has been translated and transformed for the benefit of other people too. So talk about the focus that you guys have had in terms of relationships and helping people.
It's our favorite topic,
Yeah.
Because we have to continually have the conversation with each other. Like just yesterday, we spent hours talking about our relationship, and it's a true passion of ours to help others see the possibility and opportunity in their relationship. So whether you're dating someone or you're married and trying to figure out how to navigate the family dynamics of growing as a family, it's just really an area of passion in ours, particularly couples who are in leadership together or people who aim to be in leadership in a relationship one day, navigating those multi-faceted dynamics, because we are not just husband and wife. We are also co-parents, and also we pastor together, and also we are partners and business partners and counselors. And so there's so many layers, and a lot of our friction in our relationship has had to do with when we operate in different lanes. Like when I am speaking to her as a coworker and she's receiving as a wife, that doesn't work very well. And so we've had to really navigate how we interface, and we love helping couples sort through the multi-layered dynamics in their relationship. And it's also a lot of fun, because I believe that when you walk into your home, it is possible for you to find your greatest sanctuary, to find your greatest peace in your spouse and in your family, to find joy and peace. And I believe that's the real design of family. Yes, it causes you to grow, but it doesn't have to be drama after drama. And life is hard enough, right? Like relationships should be a place where we can find safety. And if that's not how it looks today, join the club, but we can also work toward it. And especially as people are leading, leadership is hard. And so we hope to help couples find, and I feel like in sessions it comes up all the time, how to find safety here and the ability to recharge and the ability to replenish. It's so much fun to work with couples.
Yeah. I think marriage has always been a passion of ours. Well, backing up, as a melancholy choleric, I am a researcher and I obsess about it. So I was the type of teenager, I would read dating books before I knew. I was like, I'm not ready to date. I need to know how to do it good. And then I would read marriage books before we were ever engaged. In the early years of our marriage, before parenting was on our radar, I was attending parenting classes. I was like, I just need to get all this information. So I'm grateful that we've had the opportunity to observe a lot of healthy marriages and see what can be for people. And I think for many people, if they haven't had those healthy couples to model after, there's a lot of places they don't know where to start. How do I even begin to have a healthy relationship? What is a healthy marriage? And so for us to be able to share some of the lessons that not only we've lived through, but observed and been mentored by.
Yeah.
And I also think when we're in a healthy place, we can learn what not to do from those unhealthy pictures that we see.
Yeah.
Being mindful not to create those internal vows of like, oh, I will never be like that. But learning, okay, if I don't want this outcome, what do I need to tweak in order to get a different result is so impactful. But like we talked about, we've had temperament as the foundation before a romantic relationship ever began. And so there's so many layers and dynamics of understanding how we think, how we communicate, how we maybe express differently on the external than what we're feeling internally. And so helping couples navigate that specific to their custom temperament is a passion of ours, because seeing those light bulb moments turn on is such a privilege.
And to be fair, our relationship is the product of a lot of mentoring. We've had, like I said, really healthy mentors, pastors, counselors. And so we want to give what we were given, because it set us up for so much success. And so, yeah, that's why we love it so much.
And you guys are well suited for the people that we're basically catering to in terms of business and in that pool. You know, you're a leadership couple, you know, kind of through.
Like it or not.
Yep.
it's taken a lot. And so, yeah, it's a unique responsibility to lead together.
I don't remember who coined the term brutiful.
It's brutal.
But that's what leadership is.
Brutal and beautiful.
And when you're leading together, the joys are that much greater. Sometimes the weight can feel that much heavier, but when you have a partner to help walk beside you in it, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing before we kind of move on, and looking back on, you said about the modeling that you had. You know, you had good, healthy models in terms of marriage to look at, and a lot of people that, especially most people, don't have that. Basically speaking, they have the opposite of that, and those judgments have been made. You know, I never want to be like my parents, and those judgments are haranguing on people. You know, and so on and so forth, and the generational curses and transfers have been happening. And then our job is to help. That's another facet of what we're doing, of course, is helping people to dig those out, uncover them, to reckon with them head on, you know, to deal with those effectively, to release those judgments, to forgive whoever they need to forgive, and so on and so forth, and break those generational curses and transfers that are happening. And, you know, to be a couple that really essentially, I mean, I know you work through things in order to not bring them forward into your relationship. But I think, again, like you having the goods throughout, like you had the awareness at least, and you had the, you know, the understanding of that probably. And I'm sure it grew, of course, as, you know, you kind of grew up, but that's such a huge part in helping people to understand how important, like Zoraida was pointing out earlier. Then Zoraida, maybe you can comment on this too, is all that journaling has uncovered so much, using you as an example of the dysfunction of your growing up experiences and the trauma that you experienced, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and how that affected you your entire life moving forward.
Yeah. I actually, like I had mentioned, whenever I first gave a little summary of my journey, I had no idea that I had a traumatic childhood. I had no idea that I had layers and layers and layers of filtering of how I was viewing the relationships that I was entering in, romantic or with friendships. And for me, I literally viewed like the opposite of what you just talked about, Amanda, in terms of, for me, I saw a very unhealthy relationship modeled, and with my parents, and even with my like grandparents on both my dad and my mom's side. And, you know, like what Bill talked about, like that was generational curses. And I had no idea that that was even in my family. I just thought it was just a bad relationship. I didn't know how bad it was. So going into just the way that I entered into any type of relationship, I was carrying that baggage into those relationships with me, and I had no idea. And so I started the archaeological journaling. So now seeing someone like you and Justin, and, Bill and Stephanie and Tony and Francis, that has just done wonders for me, because as I was journaling and doing the archaeological work, I started removing those filters and my perspective just became clear. And I told Bill, I was just like, oh my goodness, I literally feel like I went to Hoffman Eyewear. Because I feel like he gave me
That's amazing.
so that gave me a big perspective shift.
Yeah, I will say, Zoraida, that so many people carry that same weight that you did of not even knowing. And, like, it's so important to say here that you didn't ask for a lot of that. We didn't ask for our story. You didn't ask for your story. If you're watching this, you didn't ask for those things. And as children, we didn't have the facility or ability or capacity to change any of that. That's how trauma occurs. Even the things that look good or maybe look really bad, we all incur difficulty, pain, and it is impactful to us in the area of trauma because we have no power to change it. But then as we grow, as we become adults who have the ability and the facility to live our life and make decisions for ourselves, those things are no longer true. You are no longer powerless. And yet the mentality that you had to form around your powerlessness continues to operate. And so what helped you survive that is now dysfunction today. And so we have to thank it. Thank you for keeping me. Now I'm going to leave you there because now I can say something. Now I have a voice. Now I can make decisions. Now I can set boundaries. A 5-year-old girl or boy did not have the ability to do that, but today you can. And I think that's what this process is all about forgiving and releasing and starting to live a life that you have responsibility for and that you're able to make decisions today rather than being stuck in that cycle.
One of the things that I helped Zoraida understand is that there's a trauma child inside of her that's a part of makeup, and making a distinction between who that person was and still is to a degree, and separating the two and understanding, that dysfunction, like you just said, that was really powerful, is what used to, that dysfunction helped me to survive. And now it's dysfunction.
Right.
And so now I have to deal with it a different way. So that's been a huge aspect, I know, Zoraida, for you to be able to make a distinguishing difference between, okay, this is this person kind of speaking now and wanting to get her 2 cents in and get her way in there, and that's going to sabotage my moving forward. I now know that, and I can look at it with those lenses, like you said, and say, okay, now I can actually see that, and that's going to take me down this wrong pathway.
Definitely.
Yes, and that's actually something that I heard Amanda say. Was she was talking about how basically you dysregulate, like the feeling. It should only last like in your body for like 90 seconds, but then you use that as data to basically collect the data to realize, like, where did that trigger come from and what caused the child, the inner child, to react rather than respond.
Yes.
And I loved
okay, Zoraida. Okay, you.
Hey, I learned that from Amanda. I love watching your videos on Instagram, Amanda.
You're so sweet.
You gotta make more, I guess.
Well, I was telling the truth when I said Zoraida's an avid student, for sure.
Yeah, I know you had that locked in.
Incredible.
Well, just for the sake of time, I want to make sure we get this stuff in here too. So there's other areas that you've kind of moved forward in.
Yeah.
In terms of counseling and working with folks. And so Justin, maybe you can talk a little bit about, the leadership, maybe development and the perspectives and the different areas of focus that you might present in working with people. And Amanda, just to set the stage, like working with that grief that you're very acquainted with, and then helping people to go from good to great. In your words, I really love that. It's a commonly used term, but we that's what we really want to help people to do, is move from good. And good is always the enemy of best, I always say. So good's not good enough. And then in your heart for parenting and helping, probably, helping people move towards in a healthier marriage, and having the right perspectives like you guys did is like having the goods, even though it wasn't a perfect journey,
Sure.
but you had the goods under your belt, and you're doing really the same thing with other people too. So maybe take the remainder of our time kind of focusing on that area.
Sure. Yeah, I would say that even though we do share a lot of passion, particularly for relationship, then moving past that, we are so different in a lot of our approach and makeup, even in the way that we aim to help people. And so we've really been able to leverage that in our relationship, because for a long time we tried to be each other.
Did not work.
It does not work. I'm the worst Amanda you'll ever meet, and she is a beautiful Justin, but not a good one.
I'm not as loud as a Dominican.
And so we've had to make sure that we respect each other's lanes. And so I've really been able to hone and craft a passion for working with high capacity leaders. I am choleric compulsive. There's supine in me, sure, and that has to do with those deep relationships. But I spent the majority of my life leading externally successful and internally unhealthy. And so for me, I want to help people who have that drive, that passion to win. I really want to help them win on all fronts rather than just one. Because if you're only winning in one way, you're not winning all the way. I don't want to win at work and lose at home. I want to win everywhere. And real winners have that passion, that drive to win. I feel like I'm about to coach my fitness class, but like real winners have passion and drive to win in more ways than just the ones that are more natural to them. You might be great at successfully building in business or leadership, but let's take some of those same hard-earned skill sets and bring them alive at home. So I love working with individuals with that high capacity, particularly when it comes to managing burnout, managing irritability. I don't have time to go into all this, but I battled with a crippling panic disorder in 2019, which you'll notice for her major trauma occurred and then she started counseling. I was counseling and then was waylaid by my most significant trauma. And so it was really debilitating and embarrassing to be in the middle of the battle of my mental life while also trying to lead and serve. And I have a heart for people, because you don't get to just DQ yourself like, okay, I'm out, I'm not leading anymore because life is hard. That's not, very few people have that luxury. And so figuring out how can we heal as we go. Do we need to go to the bench for a bit? That's okay, but you're not leaving the game. That's not an option, because there's too much at stake. So I love helping people be able to lead as they heal. And then particularly when it comes to temperament, what I love working with specifically is helping individuals understand their addictive behavior in regards to their temperament. Because let's be real, addiction is such a rampant force. There's sex addiction, porn addiction, drug addiction, people addiction, video game addiction, food addiction, like the list goes on and on. We are a highly addictive culture because, quite frankly, we can press a button at any time and get whatever we want. And addiction, no matter how benign it seems, always robs us of three things: our time, our money, and our relationships. And when an addiction spirals out of control, it is stealing those invaluable resources from us. And so I like to help people see, like, what need is going unmet here, and how can it be met in a healthy way? Because this addiction isn't actually satisfying you. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep going back again and again and again. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Connecting to whatever need is going unmet. And I feel like temperament is the best tool to help use that. And so sexual wholeness is another topic of serious passion of mine, because it's such a real, honest, intimate part of who we are. And if there has been trauma, there has to be healing so that we can be sexually whole. And then, like I said, anxiety is a big part of my story. And I have a deep compassion for it. And when it comes to couples, I don't know if this is just, I don't know why I come alive in the situation, but when it's crisis mode, like worst news hit, the marriage seems like it is over. I don't know if it's my stubbornness or what, but I just want, if two people want to work, I want to work with them, because I think anything can be salvaged with grace and forgiveness. Now, it's going to get ugly. Those sessions aren't easy, but hey, if it's a matter of like this family stays together or not, let's do the work. So those are the things that, like, you can tell they get me up out of bed in the morning.
Just a little bit passionate.
A little bit passionate.
Wow.
So grief is definitely an area of passion for me. And I alluded to earlier that you can't 100% understand what someone goes through. Even if I'm speaking with someone who lost their dad when they were a teenager, I can't 100% understand their pain because their relationship with their father was different from my relationship with my father. But grief in and of itself can be so isolating. We already feel like no one understands what I'm going through. And so if we further pull into that isolation, we can actually cause more issues. So working with people in their grief is such a passion of mine, because while grief can certainly be debilitating, there are healthier ways to grieve and unhealthier ways.
Yeah.
And so helping people navigate that in the healthiest way possible in their season is such a privilege and an honor for me. And if he's with the couples in crisis, I love stepping in with a couple who feels like,
everything's fine, everything's great.
Yep. And I love being able to drill in and tweak and tune and figure out, well, how can we make this amazing? Because I don't know about you on your wedding day, Bill, but when I stood and said I do and made this lifelong commitment, I wasn't picturing something just like, whatever.
We're pretty good.
Yeah, we can stay like this. No, I pictured lifelong passion and love and adventure and fun. And so no matter how dry or stale things may get, we can always reignite something and rebuild intimacy that has been lost.
Totally.
So that's a passion of mine. I love working with parents. Again, we've been surrounded. We just met with our parenting coach recently, and we're constantly gleaning and tweaking and learning in our own journey as parents, but also from working alongside others. And in particular, new moms is a passion of mine, because when you are pregnant for the first time, everything is in dream stage. Everything is in ideal mode. But when things actually occur, when that baby is in your arms, when you're sleepless, when you go through the mom identity crisis, is what I call it, you have to be able to navigate that in a way that's going to push you forward rather than in a way that's going to debilitate you. I don't know if every mom goes through the mom identity crisis, but I feel like most of us do. And so just being able to be real, because people don't talk about that, and being able to share those stories is a passion. I love working with couples building toward marriage, because similar to a pregnancy, pre-marriage, everything is theory and unicorns and rainbows and dreams and cotton candy. And then we can sometimes avoid our triggers or avoid the poor communication because, oh, well, the wedding's coming and we just love each other so much and we're just going to get through anything. But that's not a healthy picture of reality. And so once again, being able to drill into that, not to take the fun out of the building toward marriage season, but to help give some guide rails of, okay, this is what's within reality. This is what you in particular are working with your temperament, with your family of origin, with your history. And this is what your partner is working with, and how those two things are going to collide in some good ways and in some not so good ways. Giving people perspective to do the work before maybe some of the big blowups happen can prevent some of those crisis moments in marriage. And finally, I'll say I love utilizing the temperament from a leadership perspective as well, because if you understand the people you're leading, maybe not perfectly, you don't have to be a temperament expert, you don't have to be a counselor, but if you understand certain keys about their temperament, about how they receive praise or criticism or feedback, about how they might internalize something and not tell you until it explodes. If you can understand those dynamics to leverage your relationships, not from a manipulative perspective, but from a customized serving perspective of what each person on your team might need. Again, you don't have to be the savior and do it all perfectly. But if you can have a level of awareness in your leadership, it's going to take your leadership to the next level.
So good.
That's really huge. Totally huge.
So important.
That's why, this approach to the process is just so important for everybody from the inside out in terms of just their own lives as an individual and relationships and marriage, of course, and then taking that into the leadership realm. And it's not one separate from the other, and you just really packaged that quite nicely and, put it out there as like, this is what we really need to do. So just in closing, we need to do a couple of things is like talk about, the process basically is the destination.
Yes.
And how important, staying involved in the process really is.
Okay.
Give us one book that you would recommend or two that you recommend.
Yeah, your point is so well made, Bill, because like take someone like Zoraida, for example. Zoraida, I'm sure there was a moment in the process that you were like, I feel good. I'm not crying. I'm not angry. Like things are good. If you stop on that day and if you're like, I'm done, it's over, then you are ignoring the fact that life is continuing and there will be bumps and turns and unexpected events. And even when everything feels good in life, there's so much room to continue building and fortifying. And so often I get frustrated with the idea that counseling is just an event-based occurrence. Like, oh, something happened, I need to just go talk it out. No. This is about a process in which we are continually developing. I know it's been that way in my life, and I see it in the lives of my clients. There's times where it's like we're going through the darkest moment ever to, hey, we had a really great session and life is also good right now. Like those things can all coexist. So it's so important to follow through for yourself, because again, if you are a high output individual, you need high intake. Otherwise, you are asking for burnout. It's like, oh, the gas light is on in my car. Rev it up, baby. Let's go a little bit further. You're just asking not to reach the places you aim to go. If I want to actually go where I'm aiming to go, I have to have high intake to match my high output. So.
Wow.
Soapbox. Sorry.
I'm a little passionate, guys. We're just a little passionate.
I saw you guys like turn on as soon as like Bill talked about that. And I was like,
yeah, it hit a chord with
you're
me.
like, oh, like you're getting closer to the camera and everything.
I always get closer to the camera. It's a bad habit.
I can see that this is why I'm so grateful to be associated with EIS and with people like yourselves, because I can literally see the passion just oozing out of your pores. And it's so beautiful. So beautiful.
You're too kind. All right, you're the book. She's the book lady.
For Bill to say one book, this is just so difficult because there's so many phenomenal books. Obviously, I don't think we can move on without talking about the book, The Process, by none other than Bill Hoffman.
Let's go.
It just gives people such a clear understanding. Yes.
Nice.
Wow. Ready at all times. I love it.
It's actually it's such a great look into what
shameless plug.
Yes, but honestly, it's kind of the framework of the EIS process that people can understand what they're getting themselves into and the benefits of it. Because as my husband was saying earlier, like there comes many times where it's hard, where we're tired, where we want to give up, where the pain maybe gets worse before it ever gets better. And if that's when we stop, we actually really sell ourselves short of what our lives were intended to be. So I love recommending that book for people to kind of get that understanding and framework of what the kind of the journaling process and everything looks like.
Yeah. On a marriage context, there is a book. It comes from a really biblical perspective, but the thought that it produces is so important. It's called Sacred Marriage, and it's by Gary Thomas. I was just with a client who said, I wish someone would have handed me this book 20 years ago, because I think I've been living my marriage all wrong, and I'm excited to change it. The simple thought in this book is, what if marriage isn't about making us happy? What if it's about making us holy? What if this relationship is actually here to make me better, to teach me selflessness, to teach me patience, to teach me kindness? What if I am connected to someone who doesn't look like me or think like me or act like me or talk like me, so I can learn to love something other than me? And I think that if we try to just be so focused on happiness in our marriage, we might consider it a failed marriage. But if we look at marriage as the best platform for our own purging and refinement, that might be the best, most successful marriage in your life, because every day it forces you to have to be a little more patient, be a little bit more kind. So I love that book.
Can I do another one?
You have seconds.
Second. I also recently read another book this year called Try Softer by Colbert. And for those of us who push and push and push and just tell ourselves, I just need to try harder. Very, very good book.
Try softer.
That's been a book of the week in the past.
Yeah.
For sure. Today's book of the week is Undercover
Love
by
it.
John Bevere, and why your response to leadership determines your future.
If for anyone who wants to be a leader, you need to read that book, because the seeds you sow as a follower will be the fruit you reap as a leader. And you need to read that book.
Well, thank you for that, Justin. Took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
Well, we're getting short on time, so we're going to have to close. But thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Zoraida, for coming on short notice.
Yes.
Just really giving such great input, and Justin and Amanda, just for sharing your insights. And it's just great for people to get to know you as real people.
Yeah.
You know, not just school-taught counselors, but people who have lived a life from an early age on, which I so deeply appreciate. And you know, next week we're going to have another special guest, and we're not telling you who it is.
Ooh.
Surprise.
Bill, we appreciate you. Thank you so much
Yes.
for what you've created here. We honor you and the fact that you've created a space like this. There's no one quite like you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Zoraida.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.